Welcome to Bonehead Weekly. This week's topic is the hardest damn thing I've worked on in the 5 years. Well, it'll be 5 years in July that we've been doing this show. So much so that I can't do it exactly the way we set out to do it.
Now, by the way,
I will talk and I have a plan. It's just I don't know video games, or as James Thomas would say, video games, because he's the one with the PhD and says words like that. Gentlemen, did you all have a hard time with this? Is it just
no?
I had a hard time with anything current.
But so one of the reasons, because this is an episode that I pitched, if I remember correctly, and the reason
I think it's a good idea. I'm not arguing.
I want to state this. I want to say this at the beginning. The reason I pitched it is because we talk about movies a lot, and the comment I made to these gentlemen that are behind Joe and Chad is that we talk about movies a lot, but movies.
I do have my Police Academy 5 poster up.
Are small potatoes. Are small potatoes compared to video games
anymore? That's probably true. And
the expectations. So now they are similar in how much they cost to make and market.
Yeah.
But the game development has gotten into, again, the cost of what it costs to produce a movie is what it costs to do a game. Now we're seeing the same talents do voiceover work that act in movies are now doing voiceover work.
Can I interrupt you there? A third of Giancarlo Esposito's questions were about video games.
Yeah, absolutely.
I bet 25%. No exaggeration.
He's Far Cry 6, right? But Silas plays it. And I immediately, not only did they use his voice, they used his likeness.
Oh, because he does mocap for it. I mean, and he talked about it on. So, and that wasn't me name dropping. It's just, that was one of the first times that I've been with a major character actor. He's probably, I don't say character actor in a degrading way.
No,
that 25% of the questions weren't about movies, they were about video games.
Which gets to this point. Which gets to this point that I was getting ready to make. Currently, and this is from an investment database, currently the video game sector for investments and profit is larger than the movie and music industry combined, and it's only expected to get bigger, with expectations of revenue, pure profit, expected to breach over $260 billion by 2025.
Are either of you all shocked by that?
No, not at all.
No. Part of that is, and this is what I was thinking about that, because at first I was like, oh my God, that's shocking. But then I thought, how have video games changed that movies haven't? One of the ways they've changed is World of Warcraft, right? It's no longer, so back in the day, Joe, you bought your Atari and you bought your ET video game, and then you got mad and you burned it. But you owned that game.
Yeah.
They made money off you one time.
I know.
Now World of Warcraft there's still games
They're
like
not the
that.
only one, but yes.
Yeah, there's still games like that, but games like World of Warcraft, you pay a monthly fee to play. So it's no longer you pay once and you're done. But anyway, that's why I pitched this show is A, let's broaden our audience, I hope, and talk about video games. But B, we're doing pop culture, and quite frankly, we're missing the elephant in the room because it is bigger than video games.
Talking about me.
Or bigger than movies and music.
Talking about me. I think so. Why doesn't he love me?
Because I send him chocolates that he won't eat. He just gets mad at me and calls me diabetes, but at least I send him something.
I don't believe any of this.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know who's getting all these chocolates.
I've met Chad. He does not send chocolates.
Now, I will say this about video games. Like I said, none of mine are relevant. I don't own a video. I haven't bought a video game system, with the exception of the Nintendo Switch that we have for the kids, but I haven't bought one of the bigger video game systems in probably 15 years. It's just not, I'm just not that, never been that much into video games now. However, in the last year and a half, I will say I have been getting sucked into the video game world, and I'm playing more video games. And something that I've never done, I've been able to do in the 40 plus years I've been on this earth. I'm actually beating video games and I'm enjoying it. So I'm like, I don't know why now. But
did you figure out where Carmen Sandiego was?
Still can't get that.
Sandiego.
Still never can figure where she's
San Diego.
It's one of the few elusive games that that I play. I still get out my floppy disk into my old 1980s computer.
So I even brought up, I had to go to a kid's birthday party, and I started asking questions of the parents of the parents of the kids that are, and they're all the same age, all my kids' class. And I was one of the few that didn't have a PS5.
Yeah. The
majority of the folks, now granted, they're probably the ones I was talking to are more nerdy and more apt to do it, or more apt to have it. But I was one of the few that didn't have the PS5 at the house. Yeah. And it was me talking because I was curious, and I knew we had this episode coming. I was like, just how out of date am I? I'm just pretty damn out of date. The older I get, the more I realize how I ever was a cinephile.
Yeah. And I mean, I was the same way too. I hold on. I got to sneeze. So continue talking.
Well, what I want to do is because there's just so many video games out there. And when I started thinking about my favorites, and James had this idea, and James and Chad were going back and forth. And I actually completely support this. Is like, oh, the ones that haven't been made into movies and the ones that should be made into the movies, and who should direct them and who should star in them. And I was like, that's a great idea. And then I start breaking it down going, well, I really enjoyed that DuckTales game once you learned how to do the
Pongo thing. Yeah.
But they made that movie already. They made the Mario movie.
First game I ever beat, and there was like probably a 15-year gap, maybe a 10-year gap before I beat another video game.
So you all have this. I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to spit out a few games.
He's going to talk about spaghetti.
I'm going to talk about, I had the fried bologna. I'm going to talk about a few games, and then you're going to tell me, because I didn't play them, but they're huge. Okay.
Yeah, James is probably going to be the only one who did play them.
This is the only way I could attack this and have anything to say or be coherent in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, why are you going to start being coherent now?
But I will say this: the only game, so for the listeners the few listeners we have who are video game people, the last game that I beat and played was both South Park games. Stick of Truth.
I was going to say Caveman games.
No, I tried playing that on an emulator. It does not hold up.
Okay.
No, it was the two South Park games, Stick of Truth and the Separate But Whole, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It's probably those two games are probably the most fun I've had playing video games since one of the games I'm going to mention in today's podcast episode. So,
all right. Do you want me to go first?
That really is not fit into that, but that doesn't fit into this category. But yeah, go ahead.
All right. So my first one is a big one that I didn't play. That's been huge for many years. It was huge when you and I the three of us were kids. I never had it. Why have they never made a Zelda movie?
That's actually a great question.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right, guys, I'm done. This has been Joe Lewis Bonehead Weekly. Why have they made the Zelda movie? But and I was looking these up, and I was Googling.
Hasn't it been in developmental hell, or hasn't it been like getting started and then crashed?
So, Chad, the one thing that I played quite a bit that had not been that had never been shot is coming out on Paramount Plus. I could not talk about Halo because it has been done now.
Yeah, it's already out. Like
that's what I'm saying. I haven't watched it, but that last kind of recent video game that I played quite a bit was Halo. Yeah. Well, that's over with. So yeah. The next thing was me going through the history of video games of the ones, and why did they never make a Zelda film? Because you can follow the adventures of Link, right?
Yeah. And Sword of Power, Triforce and whatnot.
The Triforce is kind of convoluted, right?
It couldn't.
Well, there's three forces.
Final Fantasy, and they made a shit film out of that.
I would say the problem with Final Fantasy is there's not one Final Fantasy, which is complicated, because you would think, oh, this is a Final Fantasy. No, we're doing another one. Why do you call the last one Final? Anyway, but
also it's a movie about space animals. or ghost animals, which is not what the video game's about, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
I don't remember.
The problem is there's none of the only thing all Final Fantasy games have in common is the chocobos, the giant chickens you ride.
I thought James had said something racist there for about half a second.
Giacomo?
Are you against chocobos? Anyway,
hey now.
By the way,
hey now, walk away. Hey.
By the way, there was going to be a Legend of Zelda live action. It was going to be on Netflix, and allegedly Netflix leaked it too soon. Nintendo got mad and canceled. Is what I've read. Now I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm remembering.
But we still don't have it.
No.
Why have we not had that? That game was huge. Although I never played it as a kid. I've never played the game.
Do you think one of the challenges to that would be, and maybe this is a challenge with video games in general, is that there are now 27 different Zelda games?
That's one challenge, but they've done it with Resident Evil now several times. So, the other thing is, I was sitting in the theater Saturday. My kid, I took him to see the new Sonic. He liked Sonic and he liked the other one. We have to watch it quite a bit. And actually, I enjoyed the Sonic movie. We've talked about it on here. This next one, I almost fell asleep. But I don't think it was made for me. I'm just going to walk away. I don't want to have a turning red situation again. And I was sitting there and I looked at the box office. Did you guys see the box office?
Oh, $71 million.
$71 million.
Video games are bigger than movies. And that's it. It is. And plus, it's global.
But you got to think, too, Sonic's a rare example. Most comic book movies crash and burn. I don't even know.
Video game movies? Because comic book movies do okay.
Sorry, video game movie.
But do you think one of the reasons a lot of them crash and burn is that they suck?
No, they suck too. Yeah, completely.
I love video games, but what a lot of people think will happen, and I think this is true to a certain extent with comic book movies, is they think, oh, we're going to make a comic book movie. We're going to get the rights to that comic. And then are you going to make that comic or the comic into a movie? Oh, no. We just got the rights to it. We're going to fundamentally change it.
Which is back to Resident Evil. Those Resident Evil games have very little to do with the game. And then they finally made Welcome to Raccoon City, which I reviewed for Scarefest a few weeks ago, and I finally watched it. And then you can watch a documentary about how many, not even shots, but scenes are completely lifted in that movie from the first two, Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2. The whole truck turning over, and it's not giving anything away, is straight out of the video game, even where it cuts. Yeah, straight out. And the problem was the movie was boring.
Yeah.
There's a difference, right?
I mean,
there's a difference
if you cast and the scripts kind of suck, but it had a good atmosphere. But I mean, the movie's boring. It was boring.
Well, there's a difference though, and that's one of the issues. Is if I'm controlling it and I'm deciding at what speed that character moves, you can keep my interest longer, right?
I assume it's tough, and then I watched the. Go ahead.
But if it is a passive experience, you have to find a way to keep my interest. When I can trust. If it's a passive experience, it's easier to lose.
Well, anyway, so that was my one, Zelda. Who's next?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. So we are living in the age of superhero movies. We see 3, sometimes 4, sometimes even 6 a year. We're getting a little tired of them. Well, me and Joe are. James, I don't know how I don't want to speak.
I mean, I want to see the Doctor Strange picture, but it's more to do with Sam Raimi.
Yeah, same here.
I want to see it for Doctor Strange. He's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. But there is one superhero that has been left out, and he only exists in video games. And it is by far probably my favorite video game. Oh
God, I know where this is going already.
And it's my favorite video game from my childhood. Why haven't we seen a Booger Man movie?
Oh, I thought he was going to go with Booster Gold.
No, Booster Gold's a comic book.
Yeah,
there's no video
game.
Are you
video game only would be Booger Man.
What's the difference between a comic book and a video game? Why don't you guys take this $20?
Hold on. only about $120 million in development.
Yeah, that's about right. Take this $20 and go see a Star Wars.
So I do want to briefly read the story of Booger Man. One dark and stormy evening, the civic-minded
nailed it. You nailed it. Stick with Dork.
The civic, and you will read how this makes a perfect movie. The civic-minded Professor Stinkbomb was working in his lab above Takey Dump. Stink Bomb was working in his lab above Takey Dump, where he was secretly building a machine.
This shit.
I might as well have, called the Zap-O-Matic that would save the world from pollution by transporting it to a place he called Dimension X Crement. The same evening, eccentric millionaire Snotty Ragsdale paid a visit to the lab to investigate his project and find out how such a thing was possible. He was not sure about the machine's purpose. After activating the machine, Ragsdale inhaled a cloud of pepper through his nose, causing him to let out a mighty sneeze. The power of the sneeze broke the machine, opening a portal. Just then, a mysterious arm popped out of the portal and stole the machine's main power source, Snottium 357. In response to this danger, Snotty rushed into the men's room to change into his alter ego, the mighty Booger Man, and jumped into the portal to pursue the arm to learn the reason for the theft. And perfect movie.
You see this as a trauma film.
Universal, man.
Universal trauma?
Universal. This would pull Universal out. It would no longer be the studio that Tom Cruise. It would knock Paramount. Oh, I got him confused. Paramount can do this. And it would knock out Scientology altogether because everybody would be rooting for Booger Man.
Would they?
In my perfect world, they would.
I mean, they're remaking the Toxic Avenger as an actual budgeted film, so
yeah. God, I don't even know how that's going to turn out with Peter Dinklage. I don't know how that's going to work. But no, I think Booger Man. It could make an interesting movie for children. Farts. The Booger Man's powers are he flicks boogers, and if he drinks a can of milk, he suddenly has super loogies, and he farts and burps. And if he eats a magic chili pepper, his farts turn to fire.
I mean, Captain Thunderpants got made, so weird things have happened. And that's not an insult to Captain Thunderpants. I don't want to insult anybody that's a big fan. Joe, don't get mad at me.
I thought it was Captain Underpants.
No, that's the book series. Captain Thunderpants, or is it? I think it's Captain Thunderpants. It's
I know what you're talking about too.
The guy that played Ron in those Harry Potter movies, and I think Ron Perlman's in it too. But he develops a superpower to expel gas and fly with it or something.
Oh, James, you were grossly misselling. Well, I don't see that Ron Perlman's in it.
Okay,
but it does have Ned Beatty, Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and Stephen Fry.
Yeah, Captain Thunderpants. Look it up, kids. See, I know things. It's British. I'm intercontinental.
So yeah, no, that's just my first pick. I just think it would be if we're talking about movies, converting video games to movies, it's one of those weird, obscure ones that nobody knows about. And I think at least it might make something interesting because, like I said, the majority of comic book. Dang it, James, I keep doing it. Video game movies are not that interesting.
All right.
James.
I'm going to go with one that, and honestly, I didn't think I was going to go with this one until about 5 minutes ago. But to follow up Booger Man, I got to follow it up with something that is equally deep and meaningful, except mine actually is. So it wouldn't work if you would have told me 10 years ago, maybe we should do it as a movie or as a series. I would say, no, you shouldn't. But in a world post Game of Thrones, where you can do things that may look a little bit deeper and things like that, I would argue, no, I wouldn't do it necessarily on the previous ones, but I would do Dragon Age Inquisition. So Dragon Age is the story. Dragon Age Inquisition is the third game in the series. And basically how it starts, even the loading screen, is you see these knights, the Templar, and these mages have been kind of at war with one another for a long time. And they're finally going to have a peace summit. I'm simplifying it greatly. And they're marching toward where they're going to meet and settle this. All of a sudden, there's a huge explosion. This is all in the loading screen of the game. And a hole literally rips in the sky. They call it the breach. And the breach goes into what they term as the Fade. And in the Fade is spirits and monsters and demons and all of that stuff. And they start to come through. But Justinian V, who is the person that was going to create the balance and get the mages and the Templar to all be on the same page, is killed in the explosion. So you have demons coming through. You have a civil war that was just getting ready to run down. And you as the player play a character that eventually gets known as the Inquisitor, because you survived the blast, but embedded in your hand is something that gets nicknamed the anchor, because they discover that you can close breaches because more breaches start opening and demons are coming through them, and you're the only one that can control the breach. And the rest of the game is figuring out why did you survive, and depending on what choices you make in the game is how you get perceived. So are you a savior? In other words, are people going to think, oh, you must be a good person because you were given this gift to close the breaches? Or are you a monster? Because who else would be able to close the breach except for somebody that's been touched by demons? That's the game. You go through, but it's got all the political intrigue of what side are you going to take? Are you going to, because of course the Templars start to suspect, well, the mages had this plan all along. Of course, the mages suspect the Templars. And so everything starts to fall apart again. And you basically decide that you're going to create a third faction called the Inquisition. And you start to borrow and effectively recruit from both sides to try to get everybody to reunite. It's got a lot of magic. It's got a lot of fighting. It's got politics. It's got all that stuff. And again, if we didn't live in a post Game of Thrones world, I don't know if anybody would do it. But as a video game, it's got a lot of cool monsters in it. There are dragons, but they're very rare because the dragons are supposedly dying off. So it's very rare that you find or fight a dragon. There's all these other monsters, though. So you have an entire background of lore. You have elves, you have all of that stuff and how they fit together. It's got some really creepy moments in it. But, you can get gear by robbing graves in certain parts of the game, but you pay for that in other ways because people will see you doing it. And it turns out that most people frown on grave robbing. But anyway, so there's a great mythology behind it, and it's been built up through three.
Complicated.
It's been built up through 3 games, but as far as entertaining as a movie, I can just picture this because it does start. Like I said, the loading screen of the game is, they're just walking toward this place. You don't know what's going to happen. And then everything explodes and everybody's dead except for you.
Yeah.
And it goes from there. And I can see that working on a screen. Now, the problem is, as I've already alluded to, is as a screenwriter, director, whoever, obviously the audience isn't going to get to choose which direction that they go in. So are you going to play it as them being good, evil, indifferent? Are they a messiah? Are they a monster? You have to make that call, which is one of the challenges of adapting it. But it would be a lot of fun to see on screen. And could really, for lack of a better term, Game of Thrones it up.
So my next one is, and once again, it's a game I've never played. I've got 3, but I'm going to save one of them because I think James may do it. I think he's a big fan of a game. It's a Western game. James, you going to do the Western game later?
It was actually what I was going to do first, but I was like, I'll mention this one.
Well, you'll go with it next. Why don't we have a Bioshock film? I know. So a little bit of the history. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You go.
Was that Gore Verbinski really wanted to do a Bioshock film. And the problem was, and if you don't know who that is, he directed the Pirates of the Caribbean films, Mouse Hunt, his best film, The Weatherman.
It's a great movie.
It is a great movie. And Rango's a great movie. So Mouse Hunt's a really good movie too. I actually probably should show that to my kid. I don't think he's ever seen it. And the first Pirates of the Caribbean holds up really well. It's really fun. He's a very talented guy, but I guess the problem is he wanted to do it rated R.
Yeah.
And it's just such an expensive film where it's underwater.
Yes.
And I've never played it.
Well, I don't mean to poo-poo on you, but as of February, they announced that movie is coming to Netflix.
Have they shot it?
No, but it's coming.
You got a director? That's what
I don't think anything's
as of now. It's not made yet.
Yeah. But by the way, I mean, as far as it goes, Bioshock, and I'll lose some nerd cred here. I've never got to play Bioshock. It came out at a time when I was doing some work on my master's and doctorate and things like that, and I never got to play it, though I wanted to. But it very much looks at that dystopian and the utopian, right? And so I'll just read this. The game's concept was developed by Irrational's creative lead, Ken Levine, Levine, doesn't matter, and incorporates ideas by 20th century dystopian and utopian thinkers such as Ayn Rand, George Orwell, Aldous Huxley, John D. Rockefeller Jr., and Walt Disney. That's a very mixed bag of people to be influenced by.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I wanted to play it. It is set in the 1960s, so it's also a timepiece. And maybe that's another reason that it being so expensive would play out as well, is that not only do you have underwater, but if you're doing it accurate to the game, which often doesn't happen, but there'd be the expense.
And Joe, did you read what else might have killed the Gore Verbinski Bioshock? Zack Snyder.
He wanted to do it?
No, right when they were getting ready to announce that movie was going to be, they were going to start working on that movie, Watchmen came out and grossly underperformed, and they're like, we don't want to risk it, so they backed out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Who's up?
I guess it's me, since that was yours.
Well, I've never played it, but I know it's so huge and the visuals are so cool and they're striking. The visuals are so
yeah.
And at times creepy.
Yeah, very creepy. I just would love to know why, but go ahead.
No, mine is actually, this is actually a serious one. Boogerman, was kind of a joke. Though I would be there opening day if they made it. There is a series of games called the Oddworld games.
Yep.
I am a very huge fan of these games. There's only one of them I've not played and beaten, which is Oddworld Abe's Exodus. But these are a great series of games that, granted, the game itself, if you play it, it is a movie.
I still remember the preview, the trailer. Abe's Exodus. Remember?
Yeah.
Little thing. Anybody?
Yeah.
The only one? All right, forget it.
Yep. Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah. And if you're not familiar with it, the first one is about this. He's a Mudokon named Abe. The Mudokons are basically enslaved people from this villainous group of people called, oh my God, I had it in my head and I completely lost it. Doesn't matter. But these group of aliens have enslaved them, and Abe, who's just a lowly slave, suddenly starts getting visions, and he learns about his people's history, and it's left upon him to save them from this eve of invaders on their planet homeworld. And if you've seen any images from this game, the images are beautiful of this forest world. And even when you get into the Gluckins, the Gluckins, when you get into their more industrial scenes, they are even beautiful in the steampunky kind of way. I think this would make a good movie. And then, also cool with Oddworld is, again, it's a series of games, and they're not all focused on the Mudokons. There's also Stranger's Wrath, which is about a bounty hunter who is working for a group of people inside of Oddworld, who, he has some, it's kind of like the Pale Rider type of it, but it's an alien video game. It's amazing. And then you also have Munch's Odyssey, which is about somebody who teams up with the Mudokons. There are these little fish type creatures who are being ate out of existence by the Gluckins. And it's just, it's a great, in terms of, the environmental tones that they have into it, but also the characters are great, and the images and everything about it stunning. They're actually got to release a new game this year called Soulstorm. And it's one of the main reasons why I was tempted to buy a PlayStation 5, just so I could play it. So yeah, that is my second pick. I would love to see an Oddworld movie. James.
Joe already alluded to it, but I'm going to do it. I want to do the.
You're going to talk about Gun?
It's good, and I guess it's okay. No, I'm going to talk about Sunset Riders. Look it up, kids. No,
you should be ashamed. The movie that has not only Thomas Jane, Chris Christopherson, and Lance Henriksen.
No, I'm going to talk about Red Dead, but most people would say Red Dead Redemption. I want to take it back to the first one because I loved it, and it's why I love the later ones. Red Dead Revolver. Red Dead Revolver would be I mean, what's great about the game is it's presented as if you're watching a movie. There's the Joe, what's it called? The debris that gets on film to where it looks like there's lines in it and stuff like that.
Like cigarette burns?
No, not basically wear and tear, I guess, where it gets lines in it and stuff like that. So it'll cut to scenes where it's like you're watching an old spaghetti western.
Trash.
I sure am. Thanks, Blanche. Anyway, Red Dead Revolver is the first game in the series, though, according to Dan Houser, who did the Red Dead Redemption games, he considers it set in its own universe. But the plot is straight out of a Western. You follow Red Harlow, who is a bounty hunter, who starts to uncover the plot that killed his parents, and he exacts revenge on those responsible. The reason it's called Red Dead Redemption is when they kill his parents, he sees a gun that has been knocked out of somebody's hand and it's in the fire. And they literally taunt him and go ahead and grab it, boy. And when he grabs it, he burns his hand. And so he's scarred there. And so that's why it's Red Dead Revolver. He's scarred by the revolver in the very beginning of the game. And he spends the rest of the thing following it. And what's unique about Red Dead Revolver as compared to Redemption or Redemption 2 is that you don't just play Red Harlow. There's a couple levels where you play as a buffalo soldier. There's a couple chapters, a couple levels where you play as a trick shooting Englishman. And so it's all these stereotypes of Western movies. You at one point have to save somebody's ranch. You have to do all of this stuff. There's all these different quests, but it really is a bounty hunter movie. And he's going to get revenge, and he finds out how high up it goes. And as happens in many of these movies, of course, the people that arranged it profited off of his parents' death, and some of them are now in pretty good positions of power. What I also loved about it is because it is a Western game, it makes allusion to so many Westerns. One of the villains that you fight is somebody that refuses to leave the cemetery and carries a rifle or carries a machine gun in a coffin. Little Django illusion there.
Illusion. It's total ripoff.
Well, he's a villain. He's not the hero. It's completely different.
It's completely different.
Plus, it's also, I mean, they
dun 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 dun.
Yeah, he's pretty much also made to seem as kind of a mystic voodoo type character as his backstory. So they do some fun stuff. Would I settle for a Red Dead Redemption movie? Absolutely. Those the two games in that series are different. They each follow a different character. Red Dead Redemption, you're John Marston, who is a former outlaw. Your family is kidnapped by actually the early Bureau of Investigation before they were federal. And basically they say, we will give your family back if you will go and round up the members of your former gang. So you're forced to do that, and you have to track down your former thing. Red Dead Redemption 2, you are the villain. You are a outlaw, and you're trying to keep your outlaw, quote unquote, family together, and you have to go on quests like that. 3 different games, 3 very different stories. Any of them would work as a pretty serviceable movie. I like Red Dead Revolver because it does make tons of illusions, but you don't have to know the movies to enjoy the game. I'd pay to see it as a movie.
Do you know who's been promoting that they want that movie to be made and they want to star in it?
Who?
Henry Cavill.
Oh, for Red Dead Revolver or just Red Dead Redemption?
Red Dead Redemption.
Redemption. So I wonder if he wants to be John Marston or if he wants to be Arthur Morgan. He could play either one of them.
He wants to be Jesus.
But I would rather see a Red Harlow movie. And again, all of them are cliched in some ways because there's very few Western games out there, except for the great Sunset Riders.
He wants to be Arthur Morgan.
Oh, really? Sunset Riders. So he wants to do Red Dead Redemption 2 as a game, but probably be.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. They don't actually say. I read that wrong, guys. I'm sorry. It says that he is too fresh faced to play Arthur Morgan, though he could pull off a John Marston.
John Marston is the younger of the characters, so he wants to do the first anyway, or they want him to do, or they think he should. Anyway, the point being, there's not a ton of Western video games. There's some. I mentioned Sunset Riders because that was the Nintendo equivalent that basically did, hey, what if Double Dragons happened in the Old West?
And I mentioned Gun.
Yeah, Gun. But oddly enough, as big as Western movies have been historically, they were late. By the time that video games were getting big, there weren't too many. Though there was the Atari game Outlaw, which was a great 2-player because you had to shoot at each other, but you couldn't move. It was great. Anyway, but yeah. So I think those games are unique in that they are Western games. They do have a pretty big following now. And so if you're going to adapt a video game, why not do one that has a pretty good fan base?
Joe, that's you, bud.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to turn this thing off. I'm going back and forth between two, but now there was another video game, and they made several of them over the years, and I'm going to go back to video games that were popular that I didn't play, even though they were around when I did play video games. Why have we never had a Metroid film?
That's actually one that's a good question, because Metroid, I mean, they used it in some ways. You got to see.
I mean, she's a bounty hunter or something, right? And
yeah.
And it just sets itself up specifically for, I mean, there's space pirates, there's all kinds of aliens. She's a female bounty hunter, especially now. I mean, I could see a few years people being very sexist and saying, we can't do that now, put all that money. But I mean, why is there not a Metroid film? What?
There is. It's being directed by Ridley Scott.
Is that real?
No.
Is that real?
I don't know. We'll see. I just pull it up real quick. That's on some website called MetroidFandom.com. So maybe not.
I'm betting that's not
no. There may be one in development, but it does not exist. It's like the Bioshock thing. When it exists, it exists. Why have we not gotten a Metroid film? Because it's a video game series. There's several of them.
Yeah, I don't know. The big thing is it because the studios who develop this are really, they want to protect their products, and they know how well video game movies do.
Well, and my follow up to this is I understand that Mario didn't work, but why have we never got basically a Nintendo mashup film like Super Smash Brothers, where we have all the characters? Something that they're doing with Sonic. And that's what I was going to. I'm sorry, I know I'm doing two here, but I want to go into why did we never get this? Because so I sit through Sonic 2, and I don't know anything about Sonic, but clearly I read enough to know that those characters are legacy characters from the games that they've added into it, and they're building the world out more. Why has Nintendo not taken advantage of this? Nintendo theme parks. Nintendo part of maybe come here as part of Universal Studios theme park, and there's one in Japan, right? That's just a Nintendo theme park.
Yeah.
How in the world have they not done like a Smash Brothers or a Mario Kart? Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, and I think
all those characters together.
And again, I'm speaking out of my ass because I don't know, but I think the fact that the Mario Brothers bombed so terribly that that Nintendo basically just kind of retreated into itself, saying, "We're not doing this with our characters anymore."
No, I know, but
now we're finally, yeah, and they're finally kind of venturing out of the cave, and we're seeing a Super Mario's animated film with Chris Pratt as Mario for some reason, which still, that's one of those things where
if it doesn't begin with "I'm a Mario, I'm gonna win."
Now, see, this is, and I don't mean to get off on a tangent, but normally when fans complain about casting, I don't get it. This is one of those ones where I do get it. I'm like, that does not seem to fit at all. Chris Pratt as Mario, but we'll see what happens. I mean,
I thought that I'm not a huge Pokemon fan, and I thought that was the dumbest idea, and I slightly enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, I slightly enjoyed.
But I hear that if you're a Pokemon fan, it's tough to get through.
Yeah.
Well, I can't shit on them because there's other things that I like, and I don't like.
Yeah. I can't stand Green Lantern.
My first reaction, Chad, was your face. And then the second was like, oh man, I really did hate X, Y, and Z because they changed so much.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I agree with you. I don't know why there hasn't been a Metroid film. Brie Larson is saying that she wants to do it, which is, should be enough cred to get that movie rolling.
Do you think part of the issue is that they've realized that they're never going to get somebody to voice Mother Brain as well as Captain N and the Game Masters did?
Oh man, that is primo casting. And I'm blanking on, it's the guy who did the Audrey 2.
Yeah. Oh shoot.
I'm blanking on his name.
Hold on.
Did two things. He did a Little Shop of Horror 2s and Captain N the Game Master.
I have no idea, guys. No. I can't believe Nintendo. And that's the reason I put
Levi Stubbs.
Thank you. God, it was on the Stubbs.
I can't wrap my mind around why that hasn't happened, gentlemen. I mean,
I don't know. Yeah, you would think, and Nintendo has enough clout where they could basically do their own movies.
Check. They could write that check. And when you have theme parks and you have all these things, it just a movie or a series just because kind of I don't understand. I mean, I know they've made several different animated series, but a big Smash Brothers or Mario Kart or something where you just brought in all the characters. I can't.
But let's face it, the animated series have not been that great either. So
I just can't imagine that not being $100 million for opening weekend in the summer. Sold correctly. Yeah. All right.
So my final pick, again, it's an old one, but it's one of those games that I love playing, and I think it has a great premise. Again, it would have to be an animated film because, well, maybe not necessarily. Medieval. Are either one of you familiar with the Medieval franchise?
Vaguely.
I mean, I know what you're talking about, and they look cool.
Yeah, the characters in that game are fantastic, and the plot of it's great. It takes place in 1286. It involves this army fighting this sorcerer named Zarok, and it's being led, and it's in the kingdom of Gallowmere, and the army is being led by one Sir Daniel Fortesque. Now, the myth goes that he fought Zarok and defeated the army, and eventually succumbed from his wounds. But the truth is that this Sir Dan, as he goes by, was killed by the first arrow shot, and he fell dead. Cut to 100 years later, Zarok returns through some dark magic, and upon that dark magic, it actually resurrects Sir Dan, but Sir Dan is a skeleton. He has no lower jaw, which if you watch one of our earlier episodes, you know how much a walking skeleton bugs the shit out of me, but I would make one exception here. He has one eye.
So cool. I know, but there's just
I just can't get over it. I just can't. Still the only exception is Army of Darkness, and that is just.
But you don't even make an exception for Jason and the Argonauts, which is Army of Darkness is ripping off.
I'm sorry. I never did like Jason and the Argonauts, regardless of the skeletons. Don't get me wrong. It's Ray Harryhausen, right? Did a good job.
Oh, he thanks you from hell.
Yeah. And he has that talking out.
He's got him and Gilbert tonight are partying.
Oh man. Such a sad day.
Hey, Gilbert would have laughed about that.
Yeah. And we are recording this on the day that Gilbert Gottfried unfortunately passed away, which is just broke my heart today. But no, I really think it would make a good film. And anyway, Sir Dan comes back and clumsily tries to defeat Zarok again on his own without the army. The video games are fantastic, both Medieval and Medieval 2. I loved playing them. I unfortunately never beat them, and I don't have the original PlayStation anymore. So I can't go back and see if I can beat them now that I'm older and wiser.
You can borrow mine.
Oh, thanks. I still need the game though.
Well, I can't help that. I can't fix
So yeah, that is my third pick. I would love to see Medieval turned into a movie. James.
There's a couple that come to mind, and one that I think I've got to mention because it will forever be built into my memories of going to Big Lots. Oddly enough,
I got to see where you're going with this.
Such memories, so many strippers at the Big Lots.
Because no offense, James, video games and Big Lots do not tie in together.
So Big Lots, the Big Lots in Moorhead at one point would have exactly 2 video games, like arcade machines, and they were always older ones up near the front. And one of the ones that the Moorhead one had and kept forever was one of the first arcade games that I encountered that talked. That actually had the old 80s voice, when you did certain things.
Do drugs.
Yeah. And that would be.
Are you sure you just weren't hearing demons?
It was Hobo Dan behind the video game shooting up an arrow.
What mischief won't he get into?
There have been several games in this series, but 1985 was the first one, and that's Gauntlet. So Gauntlet was.
Hey kid, come smell my socks.
The Gauntlet is perhaps best known for the, you played at, let me make sure I'm being correct that this is Gauntlet and I'm not misremembering the title. I know there is a game called Gauntlet, but
Gauntlet involves you being able to pick like the jester, the knight, the wizard, the archer.
Yeah, so you picked a couple different ones. It bears a little bit of resemblance to a previous Maze game that's based on a title you may have heard of called Time Bandit. But this game, so it's top down, third person. You go through mazes. You got to pick between Thor, who was a warrior, Merlin, who was, you guessed it, a wizard, Thyra, who was a Valkyrie, and Questor, who was an elf. And you had to go through and solve these puzzles, do all this stuff. Your thing slowly draws away. But the reason it is forever built into my mind is that the narrator, who was voiced by Ernie Fosselius, would frequently remind you of what you needed to do. So if you got injured or something like that, it would say things like, warrior needs food badly.
Empty my pee bottle.
What?
Or if you did really, really well, it would occasionally say things like, I've not seen such bravery. So it's burned into my head, but it's basically a quest game. And it was originally started with the title of, not creatively, Dungeons. I can't make that up. But you play through the entire game and to, of course, fight a wizard. It was a hugely profitable game in the 80s. In the arcade, one operator in San Mateo, California, made $15,000 a week for 6 straight weeks on this one arcade console. It was a huge game at the time. It got ported over to Nintendo. It got ported over to Sega. It got ported over a couple times. Like I said, there's been follow-up games. There's been sequels even recently. By 1986, they did the first sequel, Gauntlet 2. The third sequel called Gauntlet, The Third Encounter, also called Gauntlet 3, The Final Quest. And of course, The Final Quest was followed up by Gauntlet 4 because, oh crap, we already used the term The Final Quest. The game was rebooted again in 2014. But it is just a quest game. You pick a stupid champion, you go through, and of course, your warrior is stronger. Your wizard fights at a different distance. Your elf uses arrows. Your Valkyrie is stronger, but not quite as strong as Thor, but has more, moves quicker. They're supposed to be balanced, but you could do a great movie about them having to team up, having to deal with this. It could be a little silly. It could be, you could have somebody that does the narration. You could do a couple different things with it, but it's one of those great old games that was hugely successful that enough people still remember. You get a little bit of nostalgia buy-in. It works with the swords and sorcery kick. It does a couple different things. And I think you could do something with Gauntlet. The good news is there's fans of it, but because it doesn't have much of a plot, you could also be creative with it. Matter of fact, I'd love to see what Sam Raimi would do with Gauntlet. Speaking of Sam Raimi.
And also Hobo Dan would let you play with his cans for about 5 cents. And I'm talking about the tin kind.
I'm trying to get the stupid thing to unmute so I could make a can joke.
Yeah, beat you to it, jerk face.
All right, gentlemen, that's all the ones I've got. Anybody got any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I've got one. Or actually, I've got several, but I want to talk about one because I think it would be a blast to see.
What?
James Bond doesn't count, James.
No. But I will say,
James.
the James Bond video games, the original ones, the fact that they have their own soundtracks, their own original music, usually done by some top-notch musicians, pretty impressive.
I will say this though, out of the James Bond games, you could turn Rogue Agent into a movie, and I don't know why they haven't.
Actually, you could do GoldenEye, not the GoldenEye, but the GoldenEye they did later on, the original GoldenEye that everybody played. They did a GoldenEye game where you play an agent that failed and you get saved by Spectre.
That's Rogue Agent.
Oh, actually,
GoldenEye Rogue Agent.
There was a Rogue Agent was a follow up, right? They did 2 different games with that.
I could be wrong, but GoldenEye Rogue Agent is the one that I've played, and I still get mad because I can't beat Dr. No.
Yeah. So no, I agree. No, the one that I would love to see that is a character. Matter of fact, I'd love to see them do more games with these characters. Is the epic quest of Toe Jam and Earl.
That's a good one. Even though I never understood the game.
Basically the plot
the hell to me. What in the hell is that?
They're 2 aliens that crash land on Earth, and they are stereotypical 80s, 90s parody. Like they learned about our culture about watching TV. So they're, they say things like jamming and Earl's referred to as Big Earl and all this stuff, but they're 2 different characters. They crash land on Earth, and the first game is you've got to go through all these levels to find all the pieces of your ship to reassemble it because you don't want to be on Earth because Earth sucks. And so they encounter all these people. And of course, the people they encounter hurt them in different ways. Because they're aliens, they can't stand opera. So they encounter an opera singer, which they have to avoid. They encounter dogs. They encounter all this stuff. It's kind of a silly game, but it's surreal. It's satire. And it really is, actually, as one review at the time said, a daringly misanthropic commentary on earthly life. Like all they want to do is get back to their planet where to them things make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You could do a great satire movie with this because they end up being obsessed with, of course, that urban culture of the California. And because it was made in the 90s, it's that California, groovy, or not groovy, but surfer lingo and stuff like that, and they just want to go home.
Yeah.
So they've got to get. Oh, and they're from the planet Funkatron.
That's the reason why.
Oh, he almost. I got tickled.
No, sir, that's wrong. He was not. Daryl Dawkins was not from Funkatron. He was from Lovetron. Get it right. We assume that's in the same area of space as Funkatron, but he was
somewhere over there in the Ford galaxy.
Yeah. But anyway, if you beat the game, they reconstruct their spacecraft, and you actually get to control it as they proceed across the landscape, and they go to Funkatron, and you get to fly into Funkatron, and you control it the entire time. So it's not, I can play the game and then they do it. No, you get to go back to Funkatron. You get to be greeted by their friends and family who are glad that they survived this terrible planet called Earth. So
cool. Yeah. No, the only honorable mention I have, I don't know why we still haven't got a Duke Nukem game, a Duke Nukem movie.
But do you think that was? I mean, is Duke Nukem a product of its time?
Well, and it's such a ripoff of the Evil Dead too. The character is Ash.
Yeah,
it's also a ripoff of Doom and Wolfenstein.
And Wolfenstein's another one.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, so real quick though, I think about, so what
I was going to say, didn't we kind of get a Wolfenstein movie with Overlord?
I like Overlord quite a bit, but I do
too.
Wolfenstein. That's an overlooked gem.
Do you think, so let me posit this for us to wrap it up. What has worked well? And by that, I mean, I think about, like, for a long time, I would have said Castlevania, but Castlevania has worked much better on Netflix than it would have as a 2-hour movie.
Well, no, I think okay. I swear to God, I don't know that anybody would have let me direct it, but I think I could have put a 3-act Castlevania movie. I think I could do that. I think I could do that well. I think I could do it. I'm sure and then as the writer, I could always bitch that the director fucked up my vision, but I think I could have done that. And I don't understand why we didn't get, and I have nothing against it. I could do a movie with The Rock in Doom. Why didn't we get that movie? I mean, he was there. They had Carl Urban and The Rock.
Yeah. I mean, why did we never get an Iron Sword movie with Fabio? By the way, useless trivia. Fabio is on the cover of the video game Iron Sword. Look it up, kids.
So I don't mean to change. Yeah, I think there's a movie there to answer your question, James. Just like I think you can do a limited series of Doom or do a movie. And a lot of these would probably be better served as a limited series because you don't have the pressure of getting all that shit in 2 hours.
Well, that's what I mean. And that's
what you do is you concentrate on 3 characters.
Yeah.
Right. And you throw away a lot of backstory and you get it. Stephen King talks about this. Best adaptations they get the spirit of it. What's the spirit of Castlevania? And then you do that.
Dracula.
Yeah. That's the spirit, and you've got a castle and you got Dracula and you do that. It's tough. And video games are so immersive. They're such a big, vast, especially for some of the ones that we just talked about. They're so good and so well done. They're so immersive, and there's so many hours you spend. There's so many corners, and there's so much plot that goes along with it.
And if you take your time,
it's like adapting a novel. So you have to break it down into what's the spirit, what's that, what characters do we concentrate on that makes a 2-hour movie. Sorry,
yeah. And I was gonna say, and you can see where like there was a lot of love done with Warcraft, and the movie just didn't work.
It was boring as hell. It
was boring, and he was trying to build up to something, but Joe help me here. David Bowie's son. Moon. Mute. I can't. Oh God, it's breaking my head.
I think. Honestly, Source Code. His first 2 pictures are pretty good. I've never actually enjoyed anything after the first 2.
Yeah, and Warcraft.
Jesus, what is his name?
You can look it up.
Duncan Jones.
Duncan Jones. Yeah, I follow him on Twitter. He's a good tweeter.
Yeah, no, Duncan Jones. I actually enjoyed Mute too. It was a little, but I enjoyed it. But Warcraft, he loved Warcraft. He took his time with that. But there is a process where you go too far into it, and it just becomes a slow mess about Jesus.
But do you think? And so let me ask you.
Sorry, Moses, because it was Moses that got left on the river. Sorry.
Let me ask you this.
You need to go to church.
I know.
You need Jesus.
Now, let me. By the way, I did just watch Passion of the Christ again for some reason.
Really,
dude? Just watch Risen. That's a much more enjoyable movie.
No. So what I did was I watched Universal Soldier: The Return, and I'm like, oh, that's a shitty resurrection film. Let me watch the good one.
Once again, watch Risen. Anyway, so but let me ask you this.
Spit it out.
So when are you too close to something to adapt it?
I'm sorry, I was leaning in. That's my problem. We've talked about this on here before. I feel like I'd be too close to the Dark Tower to adapt it. And I've told this story many times about Kubrick calling up David Milius, right?
Yeah.
John Milius. I said John Milius, asked him what's the best gun ever, and him telling him about the handgun. And then later he talking to Kubrick going, what'd you do? Well, I modified it, did this and did this and did this. And he goes, you ruined it. He goes, no, I didn't, made it better.
By the way, all I can think about
your perspective, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. Here's my pitch for letting me direct, even though I've never directed anything and have no idea which end of a camera works. But let me pitch you Hollywood right now on why you should let me direct the Dark Tower. All right, picture this. Now you give me a script, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to literally yell out, somebody get Dean Koontz in here. I want him to go over this once. I know what you're thinking. Dean Koontz didn't write that. Well, it can't hurt, folks. We saw what the first Dark Tower film was. Give me a shot.
It's tough. You have to, because what works, and clearly that movie sucked. And if you've read all the books, then there's certain parts of the books that don't work. Like Song of Susanna doesn't work for me. Her and her talking to her unborn baby. I'd be like, well, this shit's out the window in Joe Lewis's version. Or at least
Hitchhiker's Guide. I was going to say Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But that's just so hard to adapt, because how do you adapt humor? How do you, we've talked about that on here before. How do you adapt? I was sitting next to an interesting shade of blue.
And we've talked about this in other ways too. Like it's my big thing about George Carlin's books. And I read I read one of the lore books, so World of Lore, based on the podcast Aaron Mankey's Lore, which I love that podcast. But as I read the book, I realized you have to read it like he's narrating, and if you do that, the book is so enjoyable. It's like George Carlin that way, and so there's certain things where I'm like, you have to have a certain because the one of the harsh critiques I read about the World of Lore after I read it was a lot of people said, you can tell it's written by somebody that does a podcast because it's written like a podcast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the book, but I did find myself, I was reading it in the voice I know he uses when he narrates lore. And it's like George Carlin's book. So no, I think that's one of the things, like, when are you too close to adapt what you want to adapt? Like, when is it too much for you? I don't know if I have an answer to that. I would sell out to adapt anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're curious. Let us know, since we're not as big video game nerds as some of you all are. Let us know what we missed. Let us know what we could have done better, and share.
Maybe we'll do one episode where James has mentioned it, and I would like to see it, where we just play a video game. We all three play the same video game and see how badly we do against one another. We've never done it.
No, it could be a YouTube feature.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This has been.
I say we do Atari's pole position. Y'all remember that?
Oh my God.
Position in my paints.
There was even a short-lived cartoon. Look it up, kids.
This has been Bonehead.